Sweet Mother Michigan, Father Superior, coming down from Mackinac and Sault Ste. Marie. Blue water Huron rolls down to Lake Erie, falls into Ontario and runs on out to sea. The Great Lakes are a dying.
You have come upon the Great Lakes Guys podcast. The podcast features not only the history, geography, and geology of the land, waters, and people of the Great Lakes Basin, but as well we interview talented people from around the region who form the innovative cultural web of music, arts, technology, and science of the Great Lakes Basin. And before getting to the podcast interview, we would like to thank Lee Murdoch, the Great Lakes balladeer, who allowed us to use his recording of the song The Great Lakes Song. The Great Lakes Song was originally composed by Pat Daly, another prominent balladeer of the Great Lakes. Today we are going to interview Sue Muray for the second time. This interview is the third in a series of 4 interviews regarding the history of the Willow Run Bomber Plant, located near Ypsilanti, Michigan. The first 2 interviews you can find on our website, thegreatlakesguys.org, all one word. Sue is a Willow Run tribute Rosie affiliated with the Michigan Flight Museum, located on the grounds of the present-day Willow Run Airport. She has become an expert in the history of the women, the Rosie The Riveters, who labored at the Willow Run Bomber Plant during the war, and constructed the massive B-24 bombers throughout the war by the thousands. In some sense, Sue has integrated the history of the Rosies into her soul. She cares deeply about these women, their lives, and their struggles. Today, Sue will act as a composite Rosie, and her choice of attributes may surprise some a bit. Well, hello. Today, in the second interview with Sue Muray, she is going to do something a little different that we haven't done before on the podcast. She's actually going to play a Rosie the Riveter, some composite person who may or may not have worked at the Willow Run Airport, but she is going to try to bring this person to life for us and tell us about the struggles that the women went through to work at the plant and to support themselves and other members of their family during the war. And all the fact that these women were working in a kind of situation that they had not come upon before. So they were in a whole new environment then. Okay, so Sue, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself first, and then you can become Flossie Baker.
Okay, hi, I'm Sue Muray, and I'm a tribute Rosie at Willow Run, and I attend a lot of the events that they have, that we honor the vets and we honor the original Rosies. And original Rosies is what we refer to the women who worked during the war. So we call those the originals because the girls of today are considered the tributes. And so we honor their legacy by telling their stories and keeping their story in the forefront so they're not forgotten, their efforts that they did during the war.
Can you tell us, where you might have grown, where you grew up, and how you came to this? Yes, you, Sue. not Flossie.
I grew up, and I could be confused today. Yeah. I grew up downriver in Southgate, Michigan, and I went to Southgate High School, and I worked for the Southgate School District for a while on the school board, and I worked for the Southgate Post Office and the Southgate Police Department. So I'm Southgate all the way. Southgate. And I went to the 2017 World Record event that they held in Ypsilanti. I had just missed the 2015 by a week, and I didn't know they had this organization. So when I heard about it in 2017, I jumped in with my sister and her friend, and the 3 of us came down for the event. And I liked what I saw, and I liked what they did, and I liked meeting the original women, and I just joined and started coming to meetings and the different. They have different areas that you can join up. You can be on an interview committee. You can be on the drill team. You can just do like veterans events. You could sort of pick and choose what area you want to be in. At one time or another, I've done them all. So I liked all of it.
Okay. Well, that's great. So so now we'll switch over to Flossie. Okay. So we'll start out and say, well, Flossie, how did you happen to come to be a worker at the Willow Run Airport?
Well, I lived down south on a farm, and I had heard about the fact that there was this factory up in Michigan that paid women equal to what men received. And they were working on the war effort, and they were doing airplanes. And so I thought, that's where I'm going to go.
So what year would this be, say?
That was in the beginning of 1943, because I started working in January of 43. Mm-hmm. So through the holidays, I heard about this and told my parents I was leaving. And Mom didn't want me to go, of course, but I told her I was going to do it. It was patriotic, my duty, and I wanted to see what it was all about, and I would be able to send money home and help the family. So I went to the bus station and got a ticket, and they sent me to Ypsilanti.
So what did you carry with you on the bus? Just like one suitcase?
My little suitcase, just with my hardly anything, a little travel bag. And I was determined I was getting a job. I didn't get a round ticket. I got a one-way. And I just figured I would just keep working at it till I got the job. Uh-huh. But I didn't even consider a shortage of housing or transportation, or, I figured everything would just be here. And I had a rude awakening when I got here. But it all worked out. I went for training, and I seemed to have a natural affinity towards riveting for some reason. I was able to do it quite well from the beginning, and so they put me on riveting. Uh-huh. So.
Did you have winter clothes to bring up with you here?
When I first came, it was just like I took like a shirt of Dad's, a pair of pants, and my saddle shoes, and came up and figured those would be my factory clothes, and my cloth coat, And it wasn't until I was at the factory for, at least a year or so, and then I finally got a jumpsuit that was way too big, but I got those coveralls.
Yeah, coveralls.
So, but up until then, I was just wearing Dad's old clothes, my brother's old stuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So how did you find some place to live when you came up here?
Well, when I got here, I went to the factory, looked for a job. Yeah. And the interview process was about 2.5 hours, and they fingerprinted us, and they made 3 sets of fingerprints, one for the War Department, one for Ford, and one for the government? No, it was the Army. Well, 3 sets of fingerprints anyways. And so, and had the 2.5 hour interview. And that's when I was, War Department, Fords, and the FBI was the other one. Oh. Fingerprints for the FBI. And I told them, I wanted a job in the factory, and they asked me what skills I had. And I had worked on a farm, handled farm tools and equipment of that nature. And so that's, I think, why they put me towards the riveting and working with tools, drills, rivets, that sort of thing, as opposed to doing like wiring harness or something like that. So, and I picked up real quick on the training. I was trained by a gentleman called Johnny Jones, and that actually is who I ended up getting married to later on. So he was my riveting instructor, and we kind of hit it off, and I had a great bucker, and the bucker is a person that works in tandem with the riveter, and we got along really well. But, I had concerns about being in a factory and never having been there before. And then housing was the issue, and I told him I needed housing when I went for my interview, that I didn't have transportation, I didn't have housing. I was single, and I was 19. They had a place in Ypsilanti they called the dormitory, and it housed about 1,000 people. and they had buses that took you from the dormitory to the factory.
So this would be maybe in downtown Ypsilanti?
And I lived there until I was married. So as a single person, but it was a very dismal existence in the dormitory. There was no entertainment, not even a radio unless someone down the hall maybe had one. But there was like a gap under the door, a couple inches. So any noise or any walking by, you heard everything. There was no privacy there, and nothing to do at night. Maybe read a book. That was about all. And of course, we didn't have TV or anything. And I was in a dormitory, so I really wasn't like, even though I was independent to a degree, I still had like the dorm mother or whatever you want to call her. And, we had to be in our rooms and, so.
So did you have your own room?
I had my own room.
You had your own room.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, I had my own room. But it was just so boring. I really didn't like being there, but it was nice that it was there. Because, it could have been much worse if I didn't have that to fall back on. But it was nicer once I got married. We went into the Quonset huts that they had, like the trailers. Yeah. And they even had a common area laundry facility. We go do laundry and, cook food and that sort of thing, where we didn't have all that at the dormitory.
So how did you get your meals there at night?
A lot was at the cafeteria at the factory. We ate there and in town. Had to go into town. Now the people in town really liked us being there, but they didn't like all the additional traffic, all the foot traffic, and the crowd. Yeah. But they liked the money exchange. Yeah. So they were doing well business-wise, but the congestion, they weren't happy with all of that. And then the fact that I was a black person, the racism part of it, or I don't even know, maybe discrimination more than racism, I'm not sure, because it was more of a white town, white people. And so being a woman of color, it was a little bit of some thumbing their nose, a little, not everywhere, but some of it. And being a black girl coming from the farm down south, I was pretty nervous about coming to the factory in a strange town, not knowing anybody, and I didn't know what I was going to expect to face. I didn't know if they were going to be haters, if they wore sheets. I didn't know what to expect, or if we would be accepted or not accepted, or if I would be hired or not hired. I wasn't sure what to expect or what was going to happen, so I was excited about coming because it was patriotic and I would have independence and make money and help my family and help the war effort. But then I was also scared because I was going into a factory, which I'd never even seen the inside of the factory before, never did that type of work, and didn't really know what I was going to face. So it was the unknown a little bit that was unnerving.
So when you were coming up from the south, and you rode the bus. You rode the bus up. Is that
Correct.
right? Yeah, you rode the bus up.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then you get off the bus where in the middle of Ypsilanti or near the factory. And how did you get around when you first got here?
Well, the traveling bus that brought us into Michigan took us to the bus station that was there. Yeah. And then we had to find the bus that would take us out to the factory.
I see.
Or if you could get a cab or you could get a ride, whatever how you worked it and take a bus out.
So you had to carry some cash with you, did you?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, so that might have been kind of, dangerous.
Well, yeah, it was, and you're carrying your luggage and everyone knows you're from out of town, plus you don't look the same as everyone else. Yeah. So you're sticking out like a sore thumb. But they had a bus, and it was about 3 miles from Ypsilanti to the factory. Yeah. So you could hop the bus. Because when you lived out in the Quonset huts at the factory, then you would take the bus to town to go shopping. And you did your shopping at Ypsilanti. I see. And that was about a 3-mile trek. So you just took the bus into the factory, and then I just hoped I would get a job. Mm-hmm. And then someone, when I was telling them I needed housing, and I was single, they suggested the dormitory and gave me information. I got into contact with them, and that's where I lived. So.
Okay, so you get it. So how did they tell you got a job at the factory? Did they send a mail message to you? Because it probably didn't have a phone or anything like that.
Once once they did the fingerprinting, then you had to wait for the results to come back that you weren't, top 10 criminal or whatever it was, and you passed your interview. Then you would come back to the factory and start your training. And your training was paid less than the workers were paid because you're in your training period. And it depending what you learned was how long you trained. And you had such a length of time. I think it was maybe it was 30 days. You had like a length of time to learn it, and if you couldn't get something else, then you were gone. So you had to learn it and had to be able to do it. And you were paid, I believe it was, at that time, minimum wage was 30 cents an hour. The factory workers were making like almost 4 times that. They were making $1.10, $1.20 an hour. And I think the training was like double minimum wage. So they had people come there and do the training because they paid a minimum wage. They work at retail in the store, so they wouldn't come. And so I think it was double while you trained. And then if you passed your training, then you went into the full paycheck.
I see. So, do you think maybe being a farm girl, so to speak, they thought, well, she's probably used to hard work, and maybe that's one of the reasons you got the job as the riveter or something?
I think in the interview process, I think part of that was when you tell them I had to leave the farm, I left home, I left my family, took a one-way bus here. I mean, they knew there was determination. That I had incentive to do well, so I could stay here, help my family out financially, help the war effort, bring my brother home safe from the war. Bring our loved ones home, and have my independence. And I think a lot of the women that came had that, and I think that was the determining factor where a lot of them were accepted in because they just came here to do a good job and bring their loved ones home and end this silly war. Not silly, but all war's silly. But to end the war and bring your loved ones home. And so in my 2.5 hour interview, when they were asking me what I did on the farm, and I had already finished all the schooling I was going to get because I was already 19, and you didn't go all the way through school if you were a girl. You stopped at 8th or 9th grade, and I was just working the farm. And so they knew if they could train me to do well on my job, they'd have a worker that would stay and do a good job. And that's what they got.
I see.
And I stayed there for quite a while. I was there for 2.5 years.
So when you're on the job, I don't imagine you get to socialize very much because of all the noise and right. So, but you must have made some kind of friends, right? At some time. You
have a break or a lunch hour, and you make some friends. Now I didn't make as many as some of the other girls did, only because, well, number one, I was a farm girl. Number two, I was black. And even though they hired black, they hired white, they hired Oriental, you kind of stayed within your own group when you worked. I guess it was a comfort thing, or I'm not sure, but my bucker was a black girl. They paired me with another black girl. And then a lot of the other riveters, the white riveters would have a white girl. They didn't really mix too much. And you were side by side, but not together. So, I mean, I didn't get a lot of negative, like racism. I wasn't sure what to expect, and I didn't get a lot of that. A little bit. There are a few, there's always a few everywhere. But still, I felt more comfortable being with girls of color. We had more in common to talk about, more background, the same. And I think the white girls felt the same way, and I think the Oriental girls felt the same way. Where, you're talking food or recipe or, tradition of the family or whatever. It's more similar when you're with people of the same background.
So maybe you should explain to the audience what a bucker is. Yeah, bucker is. They might not be familiar with that term.
Okay, a riveter is the person who has the gun and is on the outside of the metal. So if you're looking at the body of an airplane, then the riveter would be on the outside of the body, And on the inside of the body would be the bucker. And the bucker is the person who holds a heavy piece of steel, a big, thick, heavy piece of steel. And for every rivet that the rivet gun drives in, it has to go up against that steel, and it kind of smashes the two together like a sandwich to make it a
to flatten it out, right?
To flatten the backside of the rivet. The bucking bar flattens the backside of the rivet so that you have a good bond.
Yeah, good bond.
Because you can't use screws and nuts and bolts because the vibration from the airplane would loosen it all and it'd fall off. Can't use a nail. You had to use something else. So rivet's what they use. You drill the hole between the two pieces of metal and you insert the rivet. Then you take the gun on the outside where there's the head of the rivet. And on the inside, there's no head, and you put that bucking bar against it, and when you drive it with the rivet gun against that bucking bar, it flattens both sides, and it makes a wedge, like wedged together.
So how many rivets could you do in an hour?
Oh, in the beginning, not many.
Yeah.
And a lot of mistakes. And any time the gun would slip off the head of the rivet, they call it a little smiley face because it makes like a groove in the rivet. That's considered a compromised rivet, and you'd have to drill it out.
Oh, dear.
Find another rivet to fit in the hole and re-rivet it. It would not pass inspection because it's a compromised rivet, and the strength of the plane would be compromised. So in the beginning, there were a lot of little smiley faces, but at the end, not so much.
Uh-huh.
The riveters got really proficient at being able to pick up speed and have high production and have good accuracy. Mm-hmm. So I know in each aircraft, like the B-24s, what we made at Willow Run, there's 380,000 rivets in each aircraft.
Wow, 300. Wow.
Yeah, so that's a lot of riveting. I don't know how many in an hour, but it depended what you were riveting. If you were on wings or tails or the fuselage, it was different speed because it was different job. Yeah. So it just depended.
So you had to stand all the time, is that right?
Pretty much.
Pretty much stand all the time.
Yep. A few straddled. If they were on the top of the fuselage, they'd have to straddle the fuselage and rivet, kind of sitting down, kind of spread eagle over the fuselage so that they could rivet, and the bucker would be inside with the bucking bar up over her head, matching the rivet. Mm-hmm. And some on the sides, it just really depended, but most of it was all standing. And you would see a whole line of 10, 12, 14, 15 women all lined up side by side with their rivet gun on the outside of the fuselage. And you didn't see the bucker, they're on the inside. Yeah. But they'd all be riveting the same sheet of metal and making rows of rivet lines all the way up.
So I imagine, did you have any ear protection or anything like that?
Not so much.
Not so much.
We wore our hair tied back. If you had hair that could get caught in the rivet gun or the drill, any of the equipment that hair could get caught in, you had to have your hair tied back. Yeah. There were some jobs women didn't have to have their hair tied, but most of the women would tie it up.
So the riveter also did the drilling if it was necessary to do drilling.
Or you had a driller.
You did have a drill. Oh, I didn't know. Oh, I see. Okay.
And it depended on the size of the job. I mean, if you had a very small job, you might do the drilling and the riveting and the bucking yourself if it was a small piece.
Yeah.
A rivet gun in one hand, a bucking bar in the other, and do it yourself. But on the large sheets, you always had to have multiple people.
I see. Mm-hmm. I see. So how did your shift go? Like, how long did you work before they gave you a break? And
well, you worked a 9-hour shift, and then plus you're traveling, so it was like a 10-hour day.
Yeah.
And you would get a break in the morning, or like halfway, and then you'd get a lunch, and then you get a break in the afternoon of the 9 hours.
Yeah.
Or in the partway, like the first half of the shift and the second half of the shift, because there's afternoon shift too. Mm-hmm. So when it just depended on your shift and when your group got your break or your group got your lunch, but it's pretty much how the union works right now, where you get a break and then you get a lunch and then you get another break.
Yeah. So what about like restrooms and things like that? If you had,
that would be on your break.
That would be only on your break, huh?
And, emergency maybe, but yeah. It's pretty much they expected you to do those things on your break or your lunch. Mm-hmm.
So what would be the oldest riveter there, oldest woman riveter? You know, you're 19, so you're young and strong, but
any age, really, any age that was able to do the job, they would hire if they were capable.
Mm-hmm.
So I know there were women in their 40s, and they would work in the factory, and some of them were like the mother and the daughter, and the daughter's in her 20s and the mother's in her 40s, and both of them would work. I'm not sure about grandma, but. They would have, you know, I don't think it mattered as much the age as it mattered the body count, how many you had in there working, the skill that they could do it, and the stamina that they could put up with the hours. And I think as long as they could do it, they were, you know, they went through their training if they could do it. Because some of the jobs weren't riveting. You know, some of them were reading the blueprints or doing the harness wiring for the cockpit or putting the plexiglass on the windshield, you know, so some of it was different.
So the windshields were plexiglass and not glass, right? They were plexiglass. I see. Okay.
Right. And the bullet or the gun turret things
was also plexiglass.
Yes.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay. So did you ever think about trying out for another job besides riveter?
Well, not really. I
Not
kind of like the riveting.
Yeah.
I just, you know, it was just I picked it up so fast, and I was able to be proficient at it. And the fact that I could have fewer mistakes and good production was a sense of pride for me. The women at Willow Run got an E, the E pin, and not every factory would get those. The E was for excellence.
Oh, okay.
So that the production was high and the incidents were low and the mistakes were few. And if you did well, you got the E pin, and everyone proudly put it on their lapel and wore it.
So that was given out by Ford Motor Company or the government, or
I think it was War Effort.
War Effort. I see.
Because it went to different factories. It wasn't just Ford.
Okay. I see. So were you also a member of the union?
Kind of, sort of.
Kind of, sort of.
It wasn't really like how union is today.
Yeah.
But I know there was a point where, because the coveralls were so baggy, they were like clown pants. And we're already wearing dad's pants and brother's pants, and they're hanging down over our, you know, we had to roll them up and belt them to hold them on and roll up the sleeves and stuff. And then we got the coveralls, and then the coveralls were so huge you had to belt those and roll those up. So there was one day where all the women just put their guns down and said, get us some clothes, or we're going back to our street clothes because we're not going to do this anymore. And it was a safety thing and a style thing, because it's embarrassing that you had like clown clothes you had to wear. It was like disrespectful almost. And then plus it was a safety issue. Big baggy clothes. I mean, if you have to have your hair tied up and, you know, because of safety issues, you can't have big baggy clothes. The machinery would catch it. Yeah. So the women said enough is enough. And they were off the job one day, and they had nicer clothes. And it worked.
That's
so
good.
Kind of a union.
Yeah. So how did you get along with the men in the factory? I mean, there must have been some tension there.
There was, especially in the beginning.
Yeah.
In the beginning, it wasn't Willow Run, it was Will It Run, because women were working and, quote unquote, taking a man's job. But men were going off to war, and when we were in 2 wars at the same time, they were going right and left. You know, they left the little people behind because they couldn't serve in the military, so those men were there. The skilled labor was there. 4F men were still at the factory, and then the women. You didn't have a lot of men. You know, I think it was probably 60-40 men to women.
60-40 men.
I think that's pretty close to the breakdown.
So what did the men do then? Did the men do things that the women did not do, or was there overlap? Or
same.
And
if they weren't a trainer, like the skilled labor teaching how to use a drill or how to use a rivet gun, or you know how to wire the harness wiring for the cockpit. If it wasn't that, then they were labor like a woman was.
Mm-hmm.
So in the beginning, it was a little bit of a contention, but then after a while, when the stigma of having a woman in your factory wasn't such a big deal, and when all of that kind of subsided and calmed down, and they could see that the women were just as capable as the men, and their production standards were high and their incidents were low of mistakes and problems, I think it was quite acceptable then.
Mm-hmm.
It changed. The whole atmosphere changed, because in the beginning it was hoot and hollering, whistling, hey baby, a lot of that kind of, they didn't hey baby, but they, hey sugar, or, know, and say things like that, and because it was a girl walking on the factory floor, and later it was ma'am, or, much more respect later.
Well, that's good.
But it's almost like they had to prove themselves to be accepted, but that was okay because it was for the war.
Uh-huh.
And it wasn't to prove yourself to the man. You proved yourself to the company that you were able and capable, and then the men saw it.
Yeah, I see. So you got to work by taking a bus in the morning, is that what
Yes, I took a bus from the dormitory, and then I got the bus to go back.
So who ran the buses? Was that city bus or county bus or government bus, or who actually ran the buses?
I don't really know. It was just the factory bus.
Bus.
We used to call it the factory bus, so I don't know if it was from the factory itself or if they had a contract with the city worker. I really don't know. I just would catch the bus to go to work and catch the bus to go back to the dorm.
And you had to pay the bus a certain amount?
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, when you went shopping or something, you took like a city bus, to go into town.
Yeah.
But I mean, to go to the factory and work, because there was a subdivision, like Norwayne subdivision, where a bus would go through the subdivision, pick up workers, take them out to the factory.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that was a company bus or a different company that was under contract to do that, but it went through that subdivision, picked up those workers, and took them out to the factory and would bring them back home. So I'm not quite sure how all of that logistics worked.
Yeah.
I just knew there was a bus.
There was just a bus.
Yeah. Get the bus or walk. So you hurry up and got your bus.
So did you get ration coupons during the war as a worker?
Yeah. You would get gas rations, food rations, clothing. Just everything you needed. It was a ration book.
And how did you get those rations? Who handed them out? You don't know? You don't remember?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. But I know when you carpooled, it was really nice that if you owned a car and you were driving into the factory from another city and you had some carpoolers, it worked out really well for the driver, because the carpoolers would hand over their gas ration stamps or their tire ration stamps, whatever it is you needed for your car, and then you were able to fund your car back and forth. Otherwise, you would run out. If you were just taking yourself, you'd run out before the end of the month, and you wouldn't have your new ration book.
Yeah.
So, that's a lot of the carpooling started that way.
Mm-hmm. So how did you, while you were in the dorm, as they called it, how did you handle laundry and bedding and that kind of thing? How did you, and how about heat? Did they have enough heat in those rooms?
Well, they had heat. They didn't have air.
Yeah.
They had a window.
Yeah.
They had heat, but, you had that gap under your door, so the cold air in the hallway would come in, into your room. And I mailed laundry home, so Mom would wash my clothes and mail them back to me, so I would keep double sets.
Yeah.
And that's how I handled laundry until I moved to the Quonset huts, where we had laundry facilities there once I was married.
Yeah.
That was a little bit easier then.
Yeah.
But, you hand washed a lot of things.
Did you?
And then you hung them up in your room. And
did they have like washing tubs in the dorm somewhere, or did you have to go?
I think it was like in your bathroom sink.
In your bathroom sink,
you hand wash your delicates, right?
Yeah.
And then you would have clean clothing.
Yeah.
And dry it by the radiator overnight. So
mm-hmm.
yeah.
I see. Yeah. Okay. And this dorm mother, she kept a pretty close eye on you guys, is that it?
She kept the riffraff down, and men weren't allowed, single women, and men weren't allowed, and any fraternization had to be done off site. They didn't allow stuff going on, and they kept it that pretty organized that way. I don't know if they had men on another floor. I know my floor is all women because they had several floors.
So how many days a week did you work? 6 or 5?
We worked 6 days.
6 days.
9 hours a day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So 54.
And then, so you had like Sunday off?
Yes.
Your Sunday off?
Yeah.
So did you attend church, or did you try to go somewhere?
Well, depending on your faith, sometimes it was a little difficult to even find a church that you would want to go to. I mean, there were churches in the area, and then trying to get there.
Yes.
If there was a bus that would get you to it. So it just depended whether or not you went, depending your circumstance yourself, and then your own personal religion.
Yeah.
I know the Oriental girls had quite an issue with that because they didn't have churches for them.
Right.
I don't know about temples. I'm not sure if they, and I'm sure there was a Catholic church or a Baptist church on a corner, They're more common, and they were easier to find one and get to. But being at that dorm, unless there was one close by that you could walk to on a Sunday, church was kind of out. So
I see. So did you ever end up getting a radio or something for your room while you were there?
I didn't.
You didn't get a
radio?
radio?
Some of the girls did down the hall, and I could kind of hear their radio, but I just would go to the library and get a book, and read a book, and turn in early, or do my beauty routine, or whatever, and then sleep, because I was tired from working.
Sure, I imagine.
It's a long, hard day. That riveting it's difficult.
So you must have built up a certain amount of stamina in that job after a while, right? Yeah. So
you build up some muscle, and your proficiency becomes just unbelievably fast. And in the beginning, when you're first riveting, and it takes you forever just to get the rivet in the hole and get the gun lined up, and then you're zipping through it, after you've done it for a while. And you build up arm muscles, wrist muscles, hand muscles, because that's what you're using.
Yeah.
And it was much more difficult than I thought. I thought it'd be kind of easy just going in there and driving a rivet. But the rivet guns are heavy. So and the vibration, you get a lot of that back vibration, and you're up against that bucking bar.
So were the rivets driven by compressed air?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they were.
Okay.
There are some that can be done by hand if it needs to be, but the majority of all of it was done with a gun.
So how long were the rivets? The
airplane rivets aren't that long.
I see.
They're shorter.
Uh-huh.
Now, the long and the big ones were the ones for the locomotives, the ships.
Yeah.
Those were the great big rivets, and the rivet gun looked like a jackhammer.
Yeah.
Thank God I wasn't on that one.
Yeah.
That would be difficult. I don't know how the women did those, but they did. They don't have as many rivets to do. But the rivets they did have to do were just massively huge. If you've ever seen a rivet on the side of a ship or the rivet on a locomotive, the rivet heads are probably 4 inches across. They're huge.
Uh-huh.
And then they have to have a big gun to drive that in. The big, like I said, it looks like a jackhammer. So
did you ever get to go outside and watch the planes roll out the end of the factory? Did you ever get to see them take off on their practice?
At the end of our shift, when we were leaving, you could see all of that. You could see the field, the planes that you did that day.
Yeah.
And you would see them out there kind of like a plane parking lot until they were ferried over to where they were going to go for disbursement. And so they would be lined up, how many deep and how many across, all these aircraft that came off the line that day. And then the ferry pilots, they'd take one at a time and up they'd go, and you'd see some of that. But you saw enough of them in the factory. You really didn't want to stay too much and watch more aircraft. Kind of wanted to get home.
Did you ever see Charles Lindbergh?
I did not. But, a lot of famous people came to the factory when we worked there. I know Roswell Monroe was considered Rosie the Riveter, and Walter Pidgeon used her in his movie, the documentary that he did that went across the country, and she worked in the factory with us. And then you would see occasional, there would go Henry Ford, or there's Walt Disney, or but it wasn't all the time, but they were there.
Touring the factory.
They would tour the factory because it was the largest manufacturing building in the world, and it was done in 18 months when they built it.
Yeah.
They built it in 18 months. You can't even build a house in 18 months now.
Now, did it have like windows at the top to let light in, or were the walls?
They had windows because they had blackout curtains around the factory.
Oh, okay.
Because especially when the Blitzkrieg was going on in England, the fear was if Germany was successful with England, because of the Commonwealth, Canada was part of the Commonwealth, and they're right across the border and right all along our northern coast. So we had curtain rods around the factory you could put the blackout curtains across and black out so they couldn't see where the factory was.
I see.
So it had windows because the light would, show through.
I see. Yeah. So, so you met your future husband at the factory, and then you were able to get a place in the Quonset hut. Now, how long did you live in the Quonset hut?
Well, we got married in June of 44, and I left in April of 45 because I was pregnant. So, it wasn't a long time that we were there.
Yeah, I see.
Long enough.
So where did you go? Where did you move to then?
I left the factory and then we just got a boarding room,
right?
And lived there until the factory was.
No,
done.
I mean after you left your job at the factory, where did you?
Well, he was still working at.
He was still working.
He was still working at the factory because he was the trainer, so he was still there. So we had to stay close to the factory.
I see.
But I left the Quonset hut area because we got a boarding room or I guess you would call it a boarding room, and had a little more privacy. And then when the war was over, he stayed at the factory for a while, but then he ended up losing his job, and we moved back south where I came from and moved to the family down there.
I see.
So, but it was it was an exciting time during the war. It was a sad and a frightening time because it was war. But it was exciting because everything was changing.
Yes.
The independence and the just the experience of being out of state and away from a farm and in the big city of Ypsilanti and and the huge, a mile long factory, all the people in there, thousands of people.
Yeah. And
just to see that, and then to have the self-confidence that you were handling your rivet gun and doing a good job, and that you knew on the outside of the factory you could make a decent living. You had a trade. You could do something. So that was a real positive out of a negative that I experienced, and the blowback I got from like racism and stuff. I don't know if it's because I was with Johnny and he had the respect also for being a skilled trade worker, or if it just became not that big of an issue, other than, like I said, there's always a few, and you just ignore the few that have a small mind. But it was the effort of war, and so I think that was much bigger. It was much bigger than any one of us. It was a big thing, to do our best job, to be proficient at it, to get those planes over there so the guys would have their support that they needed and they could win the war and get home. And it was much bigger than any of the little small issues back here. Mm-hmm. Even the housing and the busing and all of it was small compared to what we were really fighting.
Yeah.
So. And
you think about the war conditions and how bad they were for some of the soldiers, So, so you say to yourself, well, I can stand this, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And That plus, if we don't win, and we're not good at doing this, and we don't put our differences aside and work together as a team, what happens if Hitler then wins?
Yeah.
Or what happens if the Japanese win? Then what?
Yeah.
So it was, you wanted to win the war and bring your loved ones home. You wanted to win the war and save democracy. You wanted to win the war and shut down the fascism and the aggressors of the world and shut them down. So it was multifaceted, and the small little issues at home were so menial compared to all the other.
Yeah.
The worldly things were much larger. So.
Okay, Rosie, not Rosie, but Flossie. Yeah. Flossie the Rosie.
Yeah.
Flossie the Rosie.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll wrap it up right now. I think that was a great story about your life there, and you survived.
Yeah, and I was happy to. I loved doing the factory work, but I was happy to leave and be a family. So when I left the factory, it wasn't because I got pink slipped and had to go and I wanted to stay like some of the women got. I actually was happy to go because I was starting my family and with my husband, and it was okay for me to go back to my smaller life.
Yeah.
Some of the other women didn't do as well, especially the war widows. They wanted to stay and earn money.
Yeah.
But then the factory they stopped making aircraft and it all changed anyway.
Yes.
So, I just came in at the right time and left at the right time and met the right guy.
Well, thank you so much. It's
You're welcome.
been great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Sweet Mother Michigan, Father Superior, coming down from Mackinac and Sault Ste. Marie. Blue water Huron rolls down to Lake Erie, falls into Ontario and runs on out to sea. The Great Lakes are a diamond on the hand of North America, a bright shining jewel on that friendship border ring. It's a freshwater highway coming down from Canada, and all along the coastline you can hear the people sing. Sweet Mother Michigan, Father Superior, coming down from Mackinac and Sault Ste. Marie. Blue water Huron rolls down to Lake Erie, falls into Ontario and runs on out to sea. Hardy are the seamen on the ships that load the iron ore, hauling out of Thunder Bay bound for Buffalo. And hardy are the fishermen, like their fathers were before. They say, bury me at sea when it's my time to go. Sweet Mother Michigan, Father Superior, coming down from Mackinac and Sault Ste. Marie. Blue water Huron rolls down to Lake Erie, falls into Ontario and runs on out to sea. Deck, old men man the fishing nets, while up on the windy bridge, young men cursing to the wind, up and down the Windsor Straits, the wives and mothers lie awake, they pray Our Lady of the Lake will bring them home again. singing Sweet Mother Michigan, Father Superior, coming down from Mackinac and Sault Ste. Marie. Blue water Huron rolls down to Lake Erie, falls into Ontario and runs on up to sea, singing Sweet Mother Michigan, Father Superior, coming down from Mackinac and Sault Ste. Marie. Blue water Huron rolls down to Lake Erie, falls into Ontario and runs on up the sea. Runs on up to sea.